Good morning, YouTube family. We've made it. We've finally ripped up all the floors, and now it's time to begin the arduous journey of restumping. This is pretty exciting. I mean, I've never really done something like this to this extent before, so getting stuck into this is pretty cool process to get into. But this sort of next video that we're going to be filming here is all going to be about restumping. I'm going to try and keep it as concise as possible and try and give as much information about what we're doing to let you guys know how to do something like this in the future. Obviously, there are so many different ways to do things like restumping. We've got really tiny hardwood stumps, which I'll show you in a few more minutes, but you know, this stuff is so old, some of it's deteriorated. This back corner behind me has dropped 85 mil from the fireplace, which is only 4 meters away. So that is a massive drop, which is mainly due to erosion, undersized stumps, not enough bearing underneath, they're not deep enough. So there's lots of those sort of things we're going to go through. Anyway, we're going to show you our process of how we're going to do this. Of course, there are so many different ways of how to restump a house. There are certainly better ways of doing it than others, but there's generally a couple of standards that you want to stick to when you're doing this process. Obviously, there's a lot in safety involved. It's not something that you want to go into lightheartedly. You really want to have a lot of information down pat about what you're doing, either a professional or somebody of the like who has a bit of an idea about what structures do and how stumps work and what load and everything like that means. So definitely look into something like that. But as I said, this will give a really good idea about how we've gone about this process. You know, behind me I've got a jack already set up. I've already started, you know, the first 20 mil, and the walls are cracking and the windows are starting to move already, but that's absolutely expected. Everything's going to be shifting and moving all over the place. So we'll get stuck into it. I'll explain the process of how we're going to move forward, and then it gives you an idea about what we're doing. All right, so let's start off with our first little stump here. And emphasis on little, might I add. It's only 600 mil. Which means it's only in the ground a couple of 100 mil. Like, you can kind of see by the dark line down the bottom there, it's like 300 mil maximum, if that. So there's a little sole plate at the bottom there, which you can see, which is taking a bit of load, which is actually in pretty good condition. I was really surprised to see that, you know, for a timber that's spent its entire life buried in the ground, is actually in pretty good nick. So that's a good sign for us at this point. However, this one's got no load, as you can see. Like either side, it's picking up a mid-span of the floor here. So it's really just got a couple of hardwood joists and some flooring on top of it. It's got absolutely no load whatsoever. So I'm not really too worried about this stump. We might pour some concrete underneath it, but to be honest with you, I think we'll actually just reblock it. So I'll lift everything up above it and slide some timbers to pack the level correctly. It's dropped like 10 mil, which is nothing compared to that corner over there where the first jack is. You know, literally the distance between these two stumps is approximately 60 to 85 mil. So those ones on the outside there have sunk so much. We'll go have a look now. Which is really, and I'll explain to you why. So let's see if we can have a look here. This stump is the same size as the one before it. It's only 600 mil deep, and it's got no sole plate. It's not sitting on anything, so that's a big no-no. It's absolutely got no bearing support at the bottom of the stump, and guess what? It's holding up a whole wall. So this whole series of stumps along here, I assume at this point, I've only dug up one, but it's pretty safe to say that all of these stumps across here are sitting on no sole plates and are too small, too short, and they're not rated for the load of this home. So the process that we're going to go about here is going to be jacking up. I've got about 6 of these bottle jacks. They're all rated to about 8 ton each, which is more than capable for the weight of this home. You know, we've got a sheeted ceiling, so it really doesn't have much weight to it at all. So I'm going to be setting up 6 jacks at a time, particularly focus on these outside areas because they're going to need the most work. I'm going to be setting up my stumps underneath these bearers. I'm going to jack everything up right to its nice height, dig everything out, and then I'm going to replace that one and the one over by the door as well because they're just the worst. I'm going to hit the worst first, and that's going to make the rest of the replacements a little bit easier with this lowest end of the house done. Alrighty, we're done. We've finished jacking up the first section of the house, which is just behind the camera, and then all the way down the side there. Man, did it lift. We got like 80 mil out of the front of that house there. I just can't believe how much it's pushed up. And luckily nothing broke, nothing cracked. A couple of creaks and bits of snapping noises, but that's just the frame trying to click its way back into position after, man, I think almost 100 years, we found out the other day. So pretty awesome, but it was a fair bit of a process. That took about 2 hours to do, just slowly doing it. Like, you have no idea what these houses are actually gonna do when you lift them up. So just took my time, jacked it up bit by bit all the way down, and yeah, we've got it nice and level, which for reference, our datum point, or our center point, is the fireplace across the other side there. So all fireplaces are usually bricked up and sitting on a concrete footing, so they're not going anywhere, not now, not anytime soon. So that's our center point that we like to work off, because it's going to be nice and flat all the way through there. So anyway, come check out this stump and I'll show you sort of the heights that we've been looking at. Alright, there's our first jack there, and that's the height we ended up pushing. Like, you can even see outside now, that's just the patio. The slab outside, that's a good 60-70 mil gap. Oh man, how much this house needed to lift just to get to the height that it used to be, which goes to show how important these stumps actually are and how much work they actually do in terms of taking the house load. So that just dropped so much. And even this one next to it over here is practically the same as well. It's just a huge gap. Look at this. It's a massive gap. So that's this is really good for us now that everything's sitting on these bottle jacks. I've got 1, 2 behind me, 3, and then there's a few more over there. You can kind of see the red things between the floors. So they're set up all the way across, and jacked up each and every single stump. I mean, this one's even sitting on an angle. I don't know if you can really see it easily, but it's not even straight. So really good thing that we're doing here is going to really help this floor out. I'm just trying to weave my way in between these joists to show you the quality of our timber through here. It's just rotten. I couldn't actually place a jack on this bearer here because it's so rotten. The jack was just pushing through the timber, so I had to go to the next one across and then put an additional one here, which is actually picking up the load bearing wall in between. But it was a bit of a shame, because now that means we have to replace this bearer between these two stumps, and probably even a little bit further, just because of the sheer rot. And you can see this barge board here is just completely rotted out and away. It's just, there's nothing left of this timber, so we're gonna have to do a bit of structural replacement there. But otherwise, now this whole house is, or whole corner of the house is sitting up on these jacks, getting ready to pull all these stumps out. And there you go, there's another about 40 or 50 mil that we gained on that stump there, just to get back to normal. Alright, well, now it's time to dig out some of these stumps. Alright, and here we are. We've dug out about 3 stumps at the moment. Hi, Chai. Never too far away. So we've dug out 3 holes, all from the inside, by the way. I could have probably done it from the outside, but I was set up on the inside with the jacks, so it was a little bit easier for me to see what I was doing. But yeah, we've dug down about 900 plus a couple of 100 mil allowance for our concrete. Also included ant caps, because the last stumps didn't have those. That's always helpful. They definitely need to go in to stop all of this from happening. This is a lot of wood rot, but also along this bearer, which I'm actually going to need to replace, unfortunately, because it's so deteriorated, from wood borer and possibly termites as well. So it's always really important to have ant caps on your new stumps. These older homes just never use them, which is a bit of a shame, but they're super necessary. I just wanted to show you this stump, which is something, if you have got an older home, it's really easy to do an inspection for. If you're looking at buying a house, or if you've got one, you want to look at the quality, just from the outside, just dig down. I've literally just scratched the surface away and look at the quality of this stump. It's completely rotted, just below sand level, below ground level. There's nothing left of it. I could probably just keep digging and actually find the bottom of this stump. It's just completely rotted out and it's not doing anything. So time to get this one out and pop the new concrete stump in and set it up ready for a concrete pour this morning. And there we have it. This is the stump. It looks good there, but this is what was in the ground.
the whole house was sitting on that compared to what it should have been sitting on, which is that. It's amazing what happens in the ground over, 100 plus years. Just slowly eats away at these sorts of timbers. Hence why we're putting in nice concrete ones. They're not going anywhere anytime soon. So there you have it. Keep digging.
Bit of an update. I've got my half-time orange juice here. Try and keep some energy going because this is hard work. I've dug out 2 more stumps. Pretty much it's taken me most of the morning. And a bit of a sort of just double check over myself and my work. I thought I'd just pre-measure my last couple of stumps, the first few stumps that I did yesterday, and realised that when I had set up my laser line, there was a little bit of a discrepancy. And it was starting to freak me out a little bit because I'm almost ready to pull these first 5 concrete stumps. And all my measurements were going a bit weird. And what had happened is that overnight, all of my jacks had sunken into the ground. So it looked pretty good yesterday when I jacked everything up. But overnight, coming back in the morning, the jacks had slowly settled into the soil 40 mil. So I lost half of the height that I had actually gained yesterday. I didn't really know until I started to jack it up and I saw the soil starting to move underneath it. So there's a really big lesson to take from that, which is going to be sole plates under your bearers. You need to make sure that there's adequate size underneath your jacks to support the weight of the home. Now, the reason we dig stumps so low is that they get good bearing capacity really down low, whereas your jacks are sitting up at the surface level, so there's lots of compaction. So the wider the surface area under the jack, the better. So I've had to go through, lift everything up one by one with an extra jack to replace and just spread that load out a bit better in between all my holes. Otherwise, everything was just going to start to cave in and the house was going to slowly start to sink back down to where it was originally. So anyway, ready to get stuck into it now. So I've got the concrete, just going to start mixing that up and with a bucket start pouring it into some of these holes. So I've left a good 200 mil under each stump, which allows us to fit an adequate amount of concrete underneath. That makes the stumps sit on concrete rather than the soil, and also helps us get a little bit deeper too, which can never hurt in these instances. It's always better to go a little bit deeper with your stumps. As you know, with the existing ones, we've gone 300 mil extra everywhere along the load bearing sections because it just needs that extra support. So anyway, let's get this concrete mixer going and we'll start pouring some holes.
Okay, so here we have 3 different methods. I've just finished pouring the concrete in these 3 stump holes, and I thought it's a good opportunity to show you 3 different ways of how to actually install these bloody things. Not one of these is the same, which was really painful. This one in the corner here really hurt physically and mentally. It was very straining. But this one here on the left is certainly my preferred method, if you've got the space to do so. So this one, you simply just drill through the bearer, slide the pin through the bearer and then bend it over. So essentially the stump itself actually just hangs in midair, and then you pour the concrete up underneath it and then encase the bottom of the stump. That's a really easy way of doing it. That took about 1/3 of the time than this one did. This one was really tight underneath there. So what I actually managed to do was, with the extended section of this wall behind, they'd put a stump next to a stump. So for me, it was perfect to be able to clamp off it and then suspend that stump right next to it. So yeah, this one was pretty tight, but super handy to get the stump right next to the existing one and then use a clamp to squish them together and hang it in place. Unfortunately, I couldn't actually see the pin above the bearer because of the joists above. And the same thing for this one here on the right. It goes right through the bearer and the joist, so I can't see the pin, which meant that I can't really bend it over and suspend it. So what I did for this one actually was tie a strap around the stump and then suspended it up off the bearer and tightened it that way so that I could actually keep it really tight up underneath the bearer and it could just hang nicely like that. It did mean that it was a little bit awkward to try and get it straight. And one of my tricks for that is just to pour a little bit of sand or soil after you pour your concrete in down the bottom. Just get a little bit of sand and then compact it around above the concrete. Then that way you can actually move your stump around with a little bit of rigidity, and you can stamp it on either side to get it nice and plumb and sort of compact the stump in place while your concrete's setting. You know, we don't have to set up like all the timbers and braces and all that sort of things to keep it nice and plumb. You can essentially just compact it into place and it'll just sit there. So there's 3 different ways of how I've gone about this. We're definitely making some really good progress through the house here. So that's the front section that we did a couple of days ago. I've since, left a little bit of time in between, taken the jacks out once everything's settled and concrete's hardened enough, and then move on to the next section. So we'll leave these for at least 24 hours, and then hopefully that wall will settle. This moved so much. All the doorways and all the windows next to this wall cracked once we lifted it up, and now the bathroom door doesn't close, but that's expected. That's always going to happen. And then after this we're going to start to get onto these front of the house area and work our way all the way around, which that doesn't need too much work, so that'll be at least a little bit easier. Alright, so that concludes this section of our restumping. As I said before, we've still got half of the house to go. Into the winter bunny. So we've got half the house to go, but that's probably a good lens of what we're doing here, and you'll see probably in the next video a little bit of extra pieces once we've finished, and then we'll start leveling and reblocking all the floor out. So that's our next major step. I have a booger.
Oh, I missed that.
On that side.
I'm so sorry.
I'm full of bugs.
No, it's still there. Oh, no.
Alright, so join us for the next one. We'll explain a little bit further, and you'll get to see a little bit more of our progress in the next video, but definitely like and subscribe and stick around for some more content.
Bye!
See ya.